Steven, what's up?
Riz, how you doing? Good to see you again, man.
Feels like we've had kind of similar journeys on these projects, but also
Yeah,
just, big picture over our careers as well. So it's good to connect with you properly.
yeah. I feel like the first time I saw you in Nightcrawler, and I remember auditioning for that role, and I was like, man, when I saw you do it, I was like, you did it so much better than I even could have thought to do it. I was so jealous, man. But I was like, dude, he's so legit. It was so good. It's been so cool to watch you too.
I can't hear you. Do you understand me? I can't. I'm deaf. I'm deaf.
I imagine you're a pretty choosy actor as well. I think you're when I look at your choices, they're so intentioned in my opinion. And so when you look at Sound of Metal, when you see that script, like what draws you to that?
I had just kind of come off the back of doing a couple of bigger pictures like Venom and Bourne and Star Wars and stuff like that, which were huge learning experiences for me, having come from 10 years of just doing indie movies and never having done a studio movie. But I was hungry to get back to that. We're all in it together, all hands on deck, intimate camaraderie, intensity, the high wire act of indie filmmaking. And so my agent gave me the script, and it was just beautiful on the page. I didn't realize at that time that Darius Marder was the guy who co-wrote Blue Valentine and Place Beyond the Pines, two movies I just love with such heart. And I just loved the script, man. And I was like, all right, I want to meet this guy and see what this is about.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was like this with you when you met Lee Isaac Chung, where it's like I just connected with Darius so deeply immediately. We just had this incredible connection. And halfway through the lunch, he was like, I've been working on this project for 10 years. I want to offer you this role. I was like, amazing, dude. I love the script. I love you. Let's do this. And he goes, there's one thing. Whoever plays this role has to really play the drums on screen and has to really learn sign language. And I was like, but I don't play the drums. He was like, okay, well, how long do you need to learn? And truth be told, that was scary as hell. But that was the thing that really clinched it for me. Because, a movie like this, you literally get paid nothing. It's you take up your whole year doing it. It's all in.
Yeah.
And something about the challenge of this is like, I'm scared by it. I'll be overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I think I'll be out of control. Something interesting might happen. So I think it was that kind of the trio of those things that really made me go, man, let's jump into the deep end.
Steven, look! They're wheels! Wheels? 여기 대체 어디야?
집이지? 우리 새로 시작한다고 그랬잖아. 이게 그거야.
How did this project find you, and what were your initial feelings about taking it on?
It kind of appeared out of thin air, and that's kind of how a lot of my projects have appeared. Is just I'll live in this weird space of like I'm a little lost. Like I said, I'm kind of spinning out of control because like I don't have a thing to like direct my energy at. And so I'm just like dawdling in this weird place, and then all of a sudden, someone says, "Hey, here, did you read this script?" And I read this script, and I've been wary of films that touch upon, on its surface, what could be easily just left at identity. I felt this intrinsic feeling that it was also its own trap if I didn't tread carefully. Meaning, like, I didn't want to be defined by just my identity. That, you make the film and it's about your culture and you represent your culture. And then all of a sudden, like, you're on a giant press tour, like talking about your culture. And then like all of a sudden you become this weird de facto cultural ambassador for the thing. And you've been shrunken down to just this one metric of who you are. When my dad came over here and immigrated, like he knew he was going to run into some weird situations, but he doesn't come home and like sulk about like how he was oppressed by the outside. He just like, today was a day. And like, now I'm going to eat my food and be with my family. Like we're not ruminating about who we are against the outside world on a constant basis. We're just trying to live our life. And I think when I read the script, that was the truest part of it. Was I was like, oh, look at this. Like, this doesn't need anybody else. It just needs this family. And that's all.
Love that.
Right. And then by telling it like that, you actually take down all the barriers of entry so that anyone can enter into the story and say like, yeah, I understand. Like that's the drive of a father. That's the spirit of a mother. Like that's the will of a family. And then all of a sudden we're like all connected.
It's that humanity that I think that sounds like that really responded to you, that I think everyone's connected to. But I do think that it works in stages. And you start off, I think, with that stage one of representation, which is the stereotype. You know what I mean? It's like, I get
Very
asked to
literal.
play I get asked to play the terrorist. You get asked to play the kung fu master or something just wild. It's like, okay. And there's that stage of things. And then there's the second stage, which, as you said, is an important stage. It isn't one we want to skip completely. It's, okay, this is culturally specific character, storytelling, terrain, but it's subverting stereotypes. It's challenging those caricatures. It's overturning some of those dominant narratives. At some point, you also do want to get to that, what I call kind of the promised land, you know, and that promised land of like, it's not about that when these characters aren't defined by that. They're just people. Stage 2 and stage 3 aren't mutually exclusive. You can have something that's culturally specific, like Minari, but guess what? It's not about, how are Korean people going to... It's about them as a family, as human beings. And I have to say, it's something that I've often had to think about for myself as I approach roles and filter things and think about the representation that I'm setting forth as a brown actor, as a Muslim actor for myself. But I learned in a big way about the deaf community and deaf representation in this movie. Deaf viewers who have seen this film is that they just feel so emotional that a project like this exists. It feels like a giant leap forwards, you know, many people are saying, in terms of deaf representation on screen. And here's the thing, like, I learned so much from the deaf actors and the people that I met on the journey of this film. And they're so talented, not despite their deafness, because of their deafness, because of the specificity of their perspective, their strength of character, their experience. They taught me what listening really means with your whole body. They taught me what communication really means when you aren't even using words. So there's just, hopefully, you know, when we stretch culture in this way, or contribute in a tiny way towards trying to stretch culture each in our own way, you know, it's a win for all of us.
We need to communicate our differences too sometimes, so that we might stretch the boundaries of society and culture.
What I've found is time and time again is underneath these differences, underneath the seeming difference between you and your character in Minari or in Okja or me or Rick in Nightcrawler, there is that commonality, there is that core of humanity that we share. And actually, I end up learning something about myself. And on Sound of Metal, I feel like it was such a mirror. So I don't know, that's something that I learned about myself, I feel like in this performance, in this role, amongst other things. But I feel like the bigger lesson that I learned as an actor is, do give yourself permission to bring more of yourself to your roles.
Your performance in Sound of Metal, like the coolest part that I vibed with, because I feel like I went through a similar theme, and it seems like you're echoing that in your real life, is learning stillness and like acceptance and letting go, and to like watch the journey of Ruben, like try to control everything as like his world as he knew it was shattering. It was really cool to watch you like vibrate the whole way through until that last final sequence, and then you just take the cochlear implant stuff off and you're just still and you're just accepting your lot and your life.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah, that was beautiful, man, because like that's a similar theme that I think my character Jacob goes through in Minari, is like, you know, desperately trying to wrestle with God, you know, just trying to control his narrative and try to like grab it and like just drive it. And, you know, I mean, like if we're not learning a lesson that you have no control right now, then like, I mean, I don't know what lessons there are to learn.
결혼하면서 했던 말 기억나? 미국에 가서 서로를 구해주자고 했던 거.
Was that a lesson for you in this, or if not, what were some other things that you yourself learned about yourself in this role? Because it must have been deep. Because you immigrated when you were a kid, right?
Yeah, when I was 5. Yeah. How about yourself? When did you immigrate? Were you
I was born and raised in the UK. I was born and raised in the UK. Yeah. So it is more the kind of sense of inhabiting a cultural no man's land that I could relate to with Ruben.
Yeah.
For you, it was. It must have been
it was so literal. Deep. Maybe the largest lesson that I learned is like on the film like was how interconnected we all are. You know, I think we speak about it, but like, you know, to have a cathartic experience, like shooting a film that like allows you to see that very clearly. There was a scene where the barn burns down and like everything, he loses everything. And I remember in that scene, I was desperately trying to control that scene because I was like, you read the script and then you're like, yeah, this is the scene where I'm going to lose it. Like snot's going to come out of my nose. I'm going to freak out. And I'm like so hyped. I could see it already in my head. And like, I rolled up into that scene with like the barn on fire and like Yeri Han next to me, who is like,
so beautiful,
God,
man.
she's so good. She's so fantastic. You know, I was like singing hymns. I was like trying to crank up the emotion before the scene, just like, cause you know, I was trying to just let go to it, but then like I found that there was no emotion bubbling up. And I was really scared because I was like panicking a little bit, being like, oh my God, if I don't have emotion now before he's rolling, like, am I going to find it in the moment? And I wouldn't let go to it. And so like, I try to ramp up a cry or a freak out or something. And then I went into it. And then I remember like second take, Yeti's just looking at me. She's like, her face was like, what are you doing? and it was like the most true, because we were all so locked in as characters, and she just looked at me in a way, and I was like, "Oh, wait, hold on, maybe. All right, let me just let go. Let me just let go and see what happens." So he called action, and I was like, "Screw it, I'm just gonna go with it." And I went with it, and then I just followed it, and I just followed her, and I followed the beats, and I just lived in the moment. And then all of a sudden, I look over at Yeti, who's playing Monica, and she's just sobbing, just pouring tears and like emotion out of her face. And in that moment, it hit me all at once of just like, oh yeah, she was the one. Monica's the one holding all that emotional weight for the family. And Jacob couldn't even see it. And then me as the actor couldn't even necessarily see that. And I was trying to control it, and I learned to give into it. And it's like, that was a lesson, man.
And what's so beautiful about your performance, it's a role where we kind of get to see the full rainbow of so much of what you can do.
I was so afraid to approach this character because there's so much involved with it. There's so much pressure. It's not pressure that anyone has objectively put on it, but like if it's new and if it hasn't been seen. And so when it for me is kind of what you said about your experience on Sound of Metal was when I was like, oh, I am Jacob. Like I'm not Jacob, but I am Jacob. Like I am enough to play this part through.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I remember a quote by the actor Vincent Cassel, where he said, as a younger actor, all you try and do is escape who you are. And when you're an older actor, you embrace who you are, you know.
Whoa, facts.
한국에서는 사는 게 너무 힘들었어. 결혼하면서 했던 말 기억나? 미국에 가서 서로를 구해주자고 했던 거.
Something that was really interesting in Sound of Metal, and I actually really want to talk to you about this for Minari as well, is language. You know, expressing yourself in Korean, expressing yourself in, and I'm wondering, would you consider that your first language? Are you fluent in Korean? Was it something you had to brush up on? Because for me, expressing myself in American Sign Language really, really opened me up in a different way. You know, I read some article somewhere saying different sides of your personality, your younger self or your teenage self or your idea of what your dad was, they come out when you speak in different languages. And for me, American Sign Language was like, it was just this wild journey where, you know, again, I think I'm covering all this distance only to, you know, bring you back, to connect you more to yourself in the end. I had this most amazing ASL instructor, Jeremy Stone, become, you know, a good friend of mine. And we just met up every day for 7.5 months, like just speaking in ASL, just signing for, you know, several hours every day. And he kind of immersed me into his peer group in the deaf community. And something he taught me was that, you know, that deaf people think of hearing people as emotionally repressed. And the reason is because we hide behind words. Whereas when you communicate with your whole body, like you do in ASL, you connected very viscerally and physically to what you're communicating. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. When I became more fluent in ASL, I found myself getting physically emotional, talking about things. So it opened up my body. And so much of Ruben is about, we had these auditory blockers in, so I couldn't hear other people or myself speak. So it's about kind of listening with your whole body. And so I would feel like learning ASL connected me to my body, opened me up in a different way, allowed me to listen and communicate with my whole body, which is such a gift. And I'm wondering for you, acting in Korean, what did that open up in you? Did you find you were able to reach a deeper place, a place in your childhood?
Growing up outside of your inherent, genetic culture, I think, you're busy trying to work within those parameters. You're busy trying to fit within those patterns. And in doing so, it doesn't mean that you don't necessarily know a true version of yourself. I guess it just means like, how many decisions did you make to suppress your natural instincts?
What was it like acting in Korean?
Korean was my first language, but I moved when I was 5. And so I slowly lost it over time. And it was maintained because my parents kept it up in the house, but we could never get, what was even worse was not only was I severed from my language and culture, but I was severed from my parents over time because, my parents wanted to kind of live in the safety after they immigrated of like their little bubble of Korean Americans, Korean people in their region. And I was still trying to venture off into America and like be a person in Minari, where I'm playing a man who's purposefully choosing to untether himself to the collective that he once was from. He will lose a little bit of his language. I think a lot of dudes, especially, when I think about Jacob, like Jacob is like, this is my duty to make money for this family. I must succeed so that my family can succeed. This is my duty, and I do it for you and you and you. And like, that sounds perhaps correct, because the way that, life is set up is like, everybody has their function and their role, and you do that thing. And then like, that's what you are. But where I think it loses its understanding of love is that you justify this duty as like your sole mission, instead of understanding how to expand and open up to like bring in everybody else with you, to say like, oh, we're all collectively dealing with this thing. If Jacob truly, really understood how to love his wife, he wouldn't have treated her like a possession.
Jacob is on one hand doing something that's he deems quite noble, and the world has told him is noble, and his collectivist culture esteems as noble, which is taking care of his family and his loved ones, and everyone has a role to play. He's the caretaker. It can be easier to occupy that caretaker role than that vulnerable role. And I think that both Jacob and Ruben massively share that trait. They are caretakers. So, Ruben defines himself as a drummer who lives in an RV, who is Lou's boyfriend, and he takes care of Lou, and they keep each other on the straight. He's been sober for as long as he's been with her.
I need you to wait for me, okay? You're it for me, Lou. You're my heart. You're it for me, okay? You gotta wait for me.
He swapped out one dependency of heroin and drugs with another codependency, which is this relationship. And so he defines himself through this caretaking. And actually, the scariest thing is someone is becoming someone who needs to be taken care of, who is rendered vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, I guess two things can happen, maybe a bit of both. One is we break a little bit, but when we break, a little bit of light comes in.
And I think that was the thing about Jacob that, all these things helped me to realize the fullness of who I was or who I am. And I'm sure there's other parameters in which I can be fuller and expand and grow. And I didn't get to touch that when I was younger because I was busy mimicking. I was busy just kind of like training my body. Yeah, code switching, right? Like just like learning how to like survive in an environment that like, I was locked in my own mind.
It's really resonating with me what you're saying, this idea of you growing up code switching. As you said, it helps you to survive. I would go so far as to say is it helped you become an actor. It helped you become an actor with the tremendous rage that you have because you're actually you have to be this version of yourself, and
Yes.
Korean version of yourself at home, and American version of yourself at high school, and and so you kind of going through your life realize that maybe we do contain multitudes, but as you said, and I think this really hit home, often we're kind of we're taking the temperature of the room and mimicking what we think is expected of us in that room, which as an actor, to be honest, at the start of an actor's journey, that is also what you are asked to do.
Took a hell of a hit. I just popped your skull so hard, your eyeball just popped out.
I want to talk to you a little bit about The Walking Dead, because
Yeah.
it's an amazing show. It's like such an amazingly successful show. But I don't know if it would be fair to characterize like some part of what you said about it as, is that kind of an example of where you have felt kind of in a liminal space, in a no man's land, where maybe they didn't know what to do with your storyline?
When you get cast as the way that they already see you, and if your mind is in a place where you are happily able to service that, or if your mind is in a place where you're trying to actually like be free of that. And for me, like being on a show for 7 years and getting in to the show at an age where I was the guy that knew how to play like plucky, nice guy, like nice to everybody and like wanting to help and do the right thing. And that is me. And that's not a thing I'm shameful of. It's just, I'm more than that. And I think, over the course of the journey, I try to expand and I expand and expand. And I think Glenn grew to an extent alongside me. But then there was a point in which I realized that, yeah, right. Like he almost became a ceiling, because I became an idea over like a human character. Then he was more asked to service as the moral compass for the show. And that's cool. Like I was happy to service that. But when the time came for the character to die, there wasn't really much of a fight on my end. I think other actors on their way out, it's pretty rough. And like, not to say that it was easy for me to leave, it was still sad. And I didn't want to leave the safety of, kind of a family such as that. It was such a beautiful time on that show. But it was also like, I couldn't be stuck there. I couldn't be stuck servicing like just a genial natured guy for the rest of my career. Because on the inside, I didn't feel that way. On the inside, I can be angry. On the inside, I can be vengeful. I can be all these other things. And I wanted to explore those things for myself. The positive that lesson taught me was, it taught me that like after you're done with the job, you kind of got to throw it away. And what I mean by that is not like unappreciative of it, but more to say like, you can't really use it to take on the next challenge. You can't get through the next gate by like holding on to the baggage of that whole last experience. You kind of got to just like let it go and go, cool. Like I am evolved and changed. And then now I move to this new door fully naked again. And you just like do it over and over and over and over. And that's been the trip of the career.
You're right. It's again coming back to the idea of like not internalizing the limitations that you might have been placed on you within a certain working environment or within an industry as a whole. And I think it's interesting because in the UK, South Asians and British Muslims and British Pakistanis, British Indians were such a huge part of the population. It's like the biggest ethnic group other than white is South Asian. And so, there's been really slow to kind of for portrayals to keep pace there. And in many ways, even though it's a smaller proportion of population, there's more of that in the US. But the South Asian experience is so different in the UK. It's a lot more, frankly, poverty and ghettoization and stuff tied into it. And it has a lot more edge to it. I was getting asked to play, the drug dealer in Shifty. For the night of, I think that was really fascinating in that it was playing with the audience's preconceptions of this Muslim dude. The character is created somewhere between the audience's perception, preconception, and your performance.
You know what I heard recently? That in an interview, someone asked me and then subsequently qualified, which was really cool. And they were like, all immigrants are artists. And when I heard that, I was like, Whoa, yeah, that's so true. Like you have to make something from nothing. And there's something so powerful about that, so powerful about just on the way to the new country, you got to just drop all your crap and just like go right in and then like start brand new.
A new performance.
Yeah, a new performance. Exactly.
Any kind of breakthrough culturally is got to be seen as a win for all of us.
I think perhaps the way that we could help to see each other and help each other and like service each other comes when you realize that like I don't exist without you. That like I am connected to you. Like your well-being is my well-being.
Much love, brother.
Dude, nice to talk to you, brother.